Well, this episode has been the definition of a can of worms. For the sake of brand consistency, I've labelled this a review, but it's more of a revisit, really. I actually began work on a script for Fame and Misfortune around September last year, but threw it out because it had too much crossover with what Lily Pete was saying, and parroting better critics is something best left to individuals like Sketchy the Changeling. It did get some coverage in a subsequent Under the Lamp video, but that only really scratched the surface, and the more I think about it, the less I can make sense of this episode, on any level. But part of the job of being an analyst is to make order out of chaos, and I'm not one to back down easily, so let's give it another go. Fame and Misfortune opens with Twilight and the main six deciding to publish their old friendship journal. Well, this being a My Little Pony episode, naturally it takes a while to get to the point, but that is the basic premise. So far there is nothing meta going on, everything you see can be taken at face value, and that will soon come back to bite this story. You see, a lot of its inherent problems are rooted in its conflicting aims. Fame and Misfortune is on one hoof trying to be a giant allegory for how the fandom treats the show, while at the same time fulfilling DHX's obligation to entertain kids and sell toys. Hence the clumsily tacked on moral about not listening to others when they criticise your flaws.
And we can't change the way other ponies think about us, but we can change how we let it affect us.
The mysterious Mr. Enter, yes, I did use that name correctly, has already delved into why this does not work as a message.
Acceptance is a good message when it comes to things like your sexuality or your race or things that you can't change. That is a good message, and I get that. But it's a very different message than accepting yourself for flaws that you can change.
The funny thing is, we're not flawless does not work as a counter-argument to criticism either, because it is addressing critique of fictional characters as though it were an attack on real people. Maybe that is how the metaphor is meant to be taken, but more on that later. There are times when the writing seems actively self-aware about it all being a metaphor and having no internal logic.
Classic Pinky! Oh, she's even funnier in real life!
You've known me for years!
But then when it is convenient, it will fall back on in-universe reasoning to counter something clearly brought up as allegory. It's how you end up with extremely messy moments like this.
I read this journal cover to cover, and I have to say, your character would have been much more interesting if she'd stayed in Canterlot.
My character? We are real ponies.
Let's just examine that short exchange in context, firstly taken at face value. What the reporter is asking does not make any sense. Twilight is not a character, she's real, and the journal is a work of non-fiction. Now let's look at it on a meta level. Twilight's response does not make any sense because fiction does not equate to reality, no matter how much the writing staff might like to believe that is the case. Put simply, no, they are not real ponies. I mean, they are real ponies within the universe, but you've already consciously acknowledged that to be inconsequential. The bottom line is, if you are going to use a piece of non-fiction within the world of a TV show as a metaphor for the show itself in order to deflect criticism/actions of the fanbase represented by the inhabitants of said world and attempt to retain any semblance of in-universe cohesion, you won't succeed at either. My Celestia this episode is confused as all hell. And what about the main six? What role do they play in this meta-narrative? Are they the fictional characters or dramatic personages of Twilight, Applejack, Fluttershy, Rainbow Dash, Rarity and Pinky defending the way they are written? Or perhaps they are meant to represent the show writers themselves? Considering how Fame and Misfortune preaches on about the right interpretation, its intended meaning sure is unclear. Even accounting for the latter interpretation, the we're not flawless defense is still an extremely backwards approach to criticism. I mean, you do realise what criticism is and why we do it. Of course you're not flawless, no one ever expected you to be flawless. In fact, that is the very reason constructive feedback exists, and we provide it because we care about your work. As Lightning Bliss eloquently puts it,
why do reviewers and analysts exist for this show in the first place? Is it because we think it's bad? Actually, it's quite the opposite. It's because we love this show so much that we want to analyze and critique it because we know we can do better.
Another alternative response I've seen is that the episode is specifically addressing those who actually harass and attack the show staff or seem to hold genuine malice. The thing about that though is, where are the good critics?
We were having trouble until we read your journal. It showed us that friends can go through all sorts of tough times.
Oh yeah, they don't exist because you're not meant to question the show because it's for kids. Look at the target demographic, they don't say anything negative, so neither should you, no matter how valid and constructive it may be. Fame and Misfortune does have some good ideas and could have worked if it were merely a playful jab at the fandom, but instead it ultimately overreaches itself and fails to tell any coherent narrative. The more you examine its implications, the more it falls to pieces, and a few funny moments and a catchy musical number sadly aren't enough to redeem it from that. Oh, and keep a lookout for those rainbows. They'll make you throw up.